Hello and welcome to the Game Changers podcast, where you'll hear from trailblazing, fearless women in sport. I'm Sue Anstis, a founding trustee of the Women's Sport Trust charity and the founder and CEO of Promote PR, one of Britain's leading sports PR agencies. In this episode, you'll hear from Nicholl CBE, one of the most powerful figures in British sport. Liz has been CEO at UK Sport for the last 9 years, overseeing Team GB's unparalleled success at London 2012 and the Rio 2016 Olympics and Paralympics. This summer, Liz stepped down from that role after 20 years at UK Sport, and she's now president of the International Netball Federation. As always, it was a real privilege to head back to UK Sport's offices in London to meet with Liz. I began by asking her whether sport had been a part of her life growing up.
I grew up in a big family, 7 children, and I grew up playing football and cricket in the local park with my brothers. My father was very keen on sport. He was a local primary school teacher, and he used to lead the school teams. And so we always had balls and bats around the house. So I just loved sport right from the very start.
Were there any girls' teams playing cricket or football at the time at all?
No, none at all. And so, I envy the young women of today that got the opportunity to play football and cricket now. But in my day, I remember people sort of saying, that's the girl who can play football, or that's the girl who can play cricket. I was a bit of an oddity, but I just loved it. And then later on, those ball skills just translated into netball for me.
Indeed. Was your dad as supportive as you're playing sport as he was with your brothers?
Oh yes. I was the most interested member of the family in sport. So my father was very encouraging. So we didn't have a lot of money as when we were young. But if I needed a pair of spikes, then I knew that I could have that. But I didn't ask for anything else.
Yeah.
And we didn't go on holiday. But if I needed a piece of sporting equipment, that I knew that I'd be able to have.
Fantastic. That. And do you remember any high-profile female sports and athletes at the time that inspired you at all?
Well, I think I got most of my inspiration about achieving in sport through knowing that there were local individuals who actually, for example, played netball for Wales. And it just made me think, well, if somebody from my own hometown can do it, then why not me? So I think the inspiration was local, but I do remember, the Lynn Davises and the Dame Mary Peters that actually were just amazing sports people that I was really interested in seeing their achievements at the very highest level.
And you mentioned netball there, so when did you first start playing netball?
When I went to grammar school at the age of 11. I didn't really know what netball was before that, but I loved it because it's about running, catching, throwing, and that's what I'd been doing in the local park with my brothers. So I took to it really, really easily, and through those early years in school, I was always playing for the team of the year above. I felt as if I was progressing. I felt as if I was good at something.
And was there a point at which you realised you were very good, that you were on a pathway?
Well, I suppose also we had a couple of teachers that in their time played netball for Wales, and again, when you're in contact, when these are real people that then you do start to think, well, why not? So I always did have an ambition to play. The point at which I thought that maybe I could do this and play netball for Wales was when I was leaving Cardiff, going to university in Nottingham to study chemistry, actually. A teacher from a local school who said to me, don't lose touch with Welsh netball. And I listened, I reflected on that, and I thought, I think she thinks I could play netball for Wales one day. And so I've always said to people since, if somebody you respect thinks you can do it, you probably can, so just go for it. And so, when I went off to university, I did keep in contact, and I went back to Welsh trials, and I was selected, and played in the World Championship in 1975, was selected in 74, went in 75 to New Zealand to the World Championship, and it was just amazing to see sport at that national and international level for the first time.
You mentioned that you studied chemistry at Nottingham University, so why not sport? You had a massive passion for sport. Did you consider going to teaching like your father, or another route?
Well, I always wanted to work in sport. I loved sport and I always wanted to work in sport, but I didn't know how to work in sport because the sporting industry wasn't very visible at that point in time. So I studied chemistry because I was capable. I definitely did not want to be a teacher because my 3 eldest sisters were teachers and one of my brothers was a teacher and I wanted to do something different.
Right.
So, no, I definitely didn't want to teach. But in order to get a qualification in sport, I did a postgraduate certificate in education in chemistry and games. So I went from Nottingham University in chemistry and to a year at Leicester for a postgraduate certificate in education to enable me to have something, a sporting sort of qualification of some sort. So I did teach for just for 6 months.
Oh, right, I didn't
and then I taught chemistry and sport. And then I went to Loughborough to do a master's in recreation management because that was the qualification that was going to enable me then to move into the sporting industry.
I realised that you'd been to Loughborough. I hadn't realised you'd done the transition as well. And Baroness Sue Campbell coached you at Loughborough as well, I guess. Was she a massive inspiration to you?
Massive. And actually, the Baroness Sue Campbell coached me when I was 18 with the British University's netball team. Right. And she lived in Nottingham. And, there I was at Nottingham University and the coach to the British University's team was local. That was just a massive coincidence and opportunity. So she has always been fantastic. She was an amazing coach. She was the only coach that ever wrote to me to tell me what my strengths were and what I needed to work on. And I probably still got that letter to this very day.
And on leaving Loughborough then, so what was your first role in sport?
My first role in sport was I was the General Secretary of the Women's Inter-University Athletic Board, which was called WIVAB at the time, and it was the female equivalent of what they had a university's athletic union. So it was women's inter-university sport. I was the General Secretary, so I was the boss and actually managed the coordination of sporting competition across universities in England and Wales. So it was that was to just go from being a student into a leadership role, where I had to establish a head office and recruit staff and manage that responsibility. And I did that job for 2 years. And then what was really interesting is that, quite rightly, the time was right for the men's organisation, the women's organisations to merge. And so I was offered the number 2 role in that joined organisation, and I decided not to accept it. I thought, well, I've enjoyed being the leader, and I don't want to be the number 2 doing the same job I've been doing, but not be responsible. Yes. So I decided to accept redundancy and see what opportunities I might emerge. And then the role as the first fully paid director, it was called at the time, equivalent chief executive of England Netball came up, and I applied for it and got it. And so if I'd not taken that decision to just see where my future might take me, then I might not have been alert to that opportunity that there was with England Netball, and that was a transformational opportunity for me.
And then you stayed in post for 16 years?
I was in post for 2 years, and then I became pregnant, and so I resigned at that point in time because my husband also changed his job, so we moved back to Wales. And then he changed his job and came back to the southeast, and coincidentally, fairly soon after we got back to the southeast, the role of the CEO of England Netball came up again. So from 82 to 86, I was a mum. And in 86, I was reappointed as the CEO, which was a brave decision for netball to take. Actually, it was a brave decision for me to apply because I thought I'd done a good job for 2 years. And if I'd been rejected then, I'd have just been disillusioned about what I thought about my ability. But it was great. I was really delighted to be appointed again in 86. And then I was there till 89. So my 16-year stint was in 2 parts.
2 parts. And were you concerned when you took that 4 years out about your future career and progression, taking time out as a mother?
So my husband worked in the sporting industry as well. So I did find it quite difficult that he was actually actively involved in the sporting industry. And there I was, being a mum. But I took on voluntary work in that time. So I was I was very involved with Welsh netball again. Right. So I kept my hand in with the sport. I kept myself busy, and I knew that I wanted to get back into work, but I didn't dream that the same job would come up again. And it was the one job that I would I wouldn't hesitate to take. I didn't hesitate to take on because I loved it so much.
And had the organisation changed in the time from when you'd been in the first post and you came back sort of 6 years later?
Not really, not hugely, but I wouldn't have felt the change anyway because I was still involved with netball. Yes. The changes, I think, happened, I was obviously very involved in them from that point onwards.
And what were the biggest changes and challenges as a CEO of NGB?
Well, typical of the challenges of governing bodies today. So, first of all, I do remember the work that we did to develop a very clear strategy to increasing participation, improving performance and providing quality support. That was the core focus of the organisation. We were making some really good progress as a sport. It became a Commonwealth sport for the first time in '98. That was a big moment. We had the World Netball Championship and I was Championship Director in '95. So that was another big moment. So on my journey, I think there were these critical points that actually kept me really motivated because the sport was progressing strategically, in governance terms, with the World Netball Championship, real opportunity, Commonwealth Games, real opportunity, and then National Lottery funding coming on board around that time of the '98 Commonwealth Games. So there were those big things that kept me there to the point when in '99 I was ready to think about my next move.
So on to UK Sport, and what was your initial role at UK Sport?
I was appointed as the Director of Performance at UK Sport in 1999. I didn't really know what the job would entail when I took it up.
And was that a new role then?
It was a new role, yes. I found it quite an easy transition because I'd been the chief executive of a governing body that had received lottery funding just in those couple of years beforehand. I was credible in terms of the way I could relate to governing bodies that I was now working with, albeit they were Olympic and Paralympic sports. But I felt comfortable there because in the preceding years I'd also taken on other responsibilities, multi-sport responsibilities with the Commonwealth Games Council for England and the Central Council of Physical Recreation at the time it was called, now the SRA. So I had multi-sport experience, I had lottery experience, I had CEO experience, and so I could relate to the CEOs and the performance directors that I was then engaging with as we were starting to grow this system to develop more opportunities for more athletes to achieve at the very highest level in the Olympic and Paralympic Games.
And did you always think that you may one day become CEO when you came in as director?
Yes, but because not a lot of people know this, but at the time that I applied for the Director of Performance role, I was encouraged by the agency that was recruiting to also put my name forward for the CEO role at the time. So actually I had my hat in the ring for the CEO role and the Director of Performance. I didn't get the CEO role at that point in time, but having been encouraged to think about it could have been possible, then I always had at the back of my mind I would love to be the CEO of UK Sport. Fantastic time to come on board in '99, to see it through Sydney and Athens and Beijing, and but soon in the early 2003, late 2003, I became the acting CEO. So I did an 18-month period as acting CEO, and that was a really interesting time because I learnt a lot from that. I learnt a heck of a lot from that because then I wasn't appointed, but I did 18 months as acting CEO, and I thought that I was what I was doing. I didn't backfill as well as I might have done to cover my performance responsibilities. So I was trying to do two roles, and what happens then is that instead of leading, you're managing. And I was definitely managing and not leading. And so when John Steele was appointed in 2005, I could see the difference between a leader and a manager, and John came in and was a great leader of this organisation.
You went back to...
I went back to my director of performance role, and the Baroness Sue Campbell had to break this news. She was chair at the time, and I was really disappointed in myself. But on reflection, it didn't take me long to reflect and think, but I've got a fantastic role, director of performance at UK Sport. It's not a hardship to go back, to concentrate more, because I'd still been doing much of that work, to concentrate more on this huge opportunity. And of course, there was the London bid was in process at that point in time, and then of course in 2005 the bid was won on the 6th of July 2005, and it was a transformational moment for British sport. And there I was, a director of performance at UK Sport.
And when did you become CEO?
I became the CEO in 2010. So John was CEO from 2005 to 2010. And so I reapplied at that point in time.
Which is a brave thing to do in a way, or did you feel much more...
Well, my only hesitation was, many of the panel members that were going to appoint in 2010 some of them were the same as that had rejected me in 2005. And actually, I was quite late with my application. And the reason I applied is that I'd always wanted to do it. And I thought, if somebody better than me gets it, I'm absolutely fine with that. But if somebody that I don't respect gets it, then I wouldn't be happy. So I must put myself forward. And there's a funny scenario in which, Tim Hollingsworth, who's now the CEO of Sport England, went on to become the CEO of British Paralympic Association. He was a close colleague here at the time. And he won't mind me saying that I had encouraged him to apply for the job of the CEO. I said, I'm not going for it, Tim. I'll support you. I'll support you, Tim. And I think you should put your hat in the ring. It'd be great to have a great internal candidate. And then I had to break the news to him very late in the day. I'm sorry, Tim. I'm actually decided to put my hat in the ring. We've had good laughs about that since. But I was absolutely delighted, especially, the timing of it in 2010 to be the CEO of this organisation through 2012 was just extraordinary privilege.
And what kind of leader are you, would you say?
Well, I've grown as a leader. The great thing about leading this organisation that really has kept me all those years sort of hooked to it is its values as an organisation. And I say to people now, if your own values align with the values of the organisation, it's a powerful mix. So our values at UK Sport are commitment to excellence, working together, and openness and integrity. I very quickly sort of thought, well, how do I relate to that? And commitment to excellence, I say my father was a teacher, my mother was a midwife. I always felt as if I had to make them proud. And I had 5 older brothers and sisters. I wanted to be better than them, so I was very competitive. So I was always committed to being the best I could be at whatever I was doing. And then the working together was like, you grow up with a sport like netball, and it was always team sports for me. You're naturally a team player, and so you can't achieve anything on your own. And then the openness and integrity probably goes back to being brought up in a Catholic family where, as a youngster, I'd go to confession and kind of confess. I always, so the telling the truth was always an absolute part of me. And so, doing the right thing, no matter how hard it is, which I think is actually about integrity, is just a fundamental part of about who I am and how I operate. So I hope if you asked the team at UK Sport how I lead, I hope they would say that they can see the values play out in the way that I operate. I've had to learn. Coaching is a really important skill as a leader. I don't think I'm a natural coach, because of the chemistry background, more of a problem solver, sort of, I can find the answers. So I've had to learn to moderate that and actually learn to ask the right questions and coach. But it wasn't something that came naturally to me as a leader. And I think that sense of team is strong at UK Sport, and work hard but have fun as well.
And that's one of my later questions, was that UK Sport's renowned really for its internal culture, I think, and the employees. And I wonder, you've explained a bit in terms of your role as a leader there. Is there anything about recruitment and training, and how I really feel that all the people that we've worked with here, you feel that they emit those same values?
Yes, we talk a lot about our values here at UK Sport, and And one of the interesting things we've done over the last 18 months or so is to, and some of this perhaps going back to the consequences of the issues that were felt externally within the system, the criticisms of potentially a win-at-all-cost attitude and behavioural challenges that were being made quite public in terms of individuals' relationships with athletes. So what UK Sport is excellent at, the team is excellent at actually, if there's a challenge, let's find a solution to it and move quickly to resolving it, accepting it, analysing it and resolving it. And so what's being created to support the system is a culture health check process, which has been developed by the team. What we've always said is whatever we expect of the sports, we have to expect of ourselves. So equally, we've conducted a culture health check internally, which is about what people are seeing, hearing and feeling, what the team are seeing, hearing and feeling, and what they think that we're good at and what things could be improved. It's seen as an organisation with amazing a privilege to have the responsibilities we have that are so significant, in terms of helping athletes be the very best they possibly can be.
And as CEO, you've had extraordinary success in terms of delivering almost precisely what you predicted in terms of medal counts with record performances in London and Sochi and Rio. Can you tell us a little bit about that process of the prediction, how that evolved?
So we've always taken an approach when we predict an outcome at an Olympic Games or a Paralympic Games, it has to be real. It has to come from the sum of the possibilities in each of the sports. So the discussion with sports began way back in 2006 on the start of the journey to 2012. What's that range of possibility that each and every sport could achieve, and let's invest in that range of possibility. And so the range is, the bottom number is the number below which we'd all be disappointed if that sport didn't achieve that number, and the top of the range is if everything went well on the day for every athlete's really got that performance potential, then that's the number of medals that sport could produce. The UK Sport invests in that medal range of possibility. There's no guarantees in performance sport, but there are possibilities. And then the sum of that total range makes up the range of possibility for the outcome for Team GB and Paralympics GB at the Games. And so those possibilities are reviewed annually, so that the range then sort of gets tighter, and as we move towards the Games, just prior to the actual Games itself, within a month or so of the Games, then the actual range of possibility is announced. What's informed that since 2012 has been the more forensic approach that the team takes and the sports are taking to analysing that performance potential. So there is a sport analytics team here at UK Sport, and since 2012 the team has been helping sports be more competent in terms of analysing the potential of individual athletes, tracking athletes. Athlete performance data's freely available, and so it's very easy to do that if you can gather that data and analyse that data. And that's an example of in what I've seen here at UK Sport in the period since I started, is in each 4-year period there's a big step up in some way, shape or form. In the period up until 2004, it was just about supporting more athletes and more sports. To 2004 to 2008, it was actually really focusing on performance reviews and management through a Mission 2012 process, we called that. Building on that to 2012. Post-2012, it was sport analytics and actually being more forensic. 2016 to now, big focus on culture.
Yeah. I think 863 medals have been won in British athletes in the Summer and Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games during your tenure. So now you've left. Are you able to tell if you had any favourites there, or is it a bit like your children and you're not allowed to say who your favourites are?
Well, there are so many, and and everyone is just incredibly special. So if I'm reflecting back on my career with UK Sport, I'm thinking of, first of all, getting the job, amazing, coming into this organisation and being able to create a team. Actually going to my first Games in 2000 and seeing Paralympic sport for the first time. And actually I remember sitting in the swimming pool. I was just blown away in terms of how amazing Paralympic sport is and what can be achieved And then, 2005 being in the middle of Trafalgar Square, when that bid was won, and I did a radio interview prior to the announcement, and the interviewer said, "Can you just pretend we've won and actually just react?" So I just made up that I just did whatever I could, and I had a little transistor radio and the earpiece in my ear, and I went back into the middle of the crowd with my colleagues, waiting for this announcement. And there's a time delay sometimes. It comes through at different times. Well, it came into my earpiece that we'd won prior to it coming onto the big screen, and so I jumped in the air for a split second. Before anybody else, and I felt these eyes looking at me, and then everybody else jumped in the air. So that is the funniest moment.
Premonition.
But it's very fun. And then I just remember thinking, I was asked to pretend you can never replicate those emotions. It was absolutely amazing, and people were crying, and it was just a fantastic moment for British sport. And then I move on then to 2006 when we had an amazing decision of government to announce significant increase of funds, which would enable us to see this journey through to 2012, which was a real vote of confidence in us as an organisation. And so the responsibilities we had then were not just for the next games, but it was for the period right up to 2012.
And how much was that increase in funding at the time?
We asked for up to 300 million. We got 200 million. But 200 million extra was a big uplift. It showed how important this was to the government at the time. And then 2008, because we'd won 28 medals. If I talk Olympic, but the progress on the paras was paralleled this. So 28 medals in Sydney, 30 medals in Athens, 47 medals in Beijing. That uplift was just amazing, and it was within the range of possibility. We knew that, but to have achieved that in Beijing just showed that by working together, by really focusing our support, and with the athletes now having had a long period of actually being supported to be able to train full time, then we knew the system was working. And then, of course, the journey to 2012, when I was the CEO during the 2012 Games, was an amazing 65 and 120, 65 Olympic medals, 120 Paralympic medals, and every one of those was very special.
Absolutely.
And you could feel the impact on the nation. And then to go on from there to better that in Rio, it was quite interesting because straight after London 2012, everybody had worked together for a common cause because there was a massive platform. So our discussions here were about how do we keep the system together now, because that London focus is we're moving through it now. And so it was a brave decision to announce very quickly that we would aim to do what no host nation had done before and win more medals at the next Games. But the aim was to actually just keep everybody together, keep everybody on it. Let's not lose this collective working and sharing across sports that we had facilitated with sports helping each other, because the collective result was almost more important than the results of the individual sports. And so we did keep that together then to 2016. And that was very special to be in Rio in 2016.
Oh, fantastic. It's like a beautiful summary of the exciting moments of your time here. You alluded a little bit, there's been some criticism of UK sports' sort of all or nothing funding system in the past, and whether that emphasis on winning for some sports meant they neglected their duty of care. Do you think UK sport now has the right balance between delivering those medals and athlete welfare?
In performance sport, athletes learn from their victories and they learn from their defeats. So there's always something to learn from issues when they arise and from negative experience. So I would say it was difficult at the time when issues that were evident in the sport, and it started really with British cycling, and it was very difficult, it was very public, and it was predominantly about the behaviour of an individual, but it was reflecting badly on the whole system. The immediate reaction is to feel really, really frustrated that, in fact, an individual hasn't taken their responsibilities, hasn't handled their responsibilities well, that an athlete had, been adversely affected by that, and then to feel a bit defensive about the system, because what we've got is a system of 1,000 athletes, probably the same number of people working right across sports, a huge number of massively committed and passionate people doing fantastically amazing, great work on behalf of the athletes to enable them to succeed. And for individual issues, and each one is significant and important and needs to be addressed, to reflect badly on the whole system, I thought at the time was unfair. And as an individual, you immediately start to feel a bit defensive. You feel the need to be a bit defensive. But then when you think about, you do learn, everybody learns from things that don't go, you learn more from things that don't go right, because you stop and reflect. And so it felt difficult until we were very clear as an organisation exactly what needs to be happening here. So there were a list of 6 things that we were going to immediately do, and we agreed and we announced we would do it. First of all, we would appoint a head of sport integrity here at UK Sport. We would establish policies and guidance so that in fact sports and individuals within sports could manage their responsibilities, had a framework for managing their responsibilities better. We would invest more in the British Athletes Commission to strengthen up that organisation so that if athletes did have issues, they had somewhere to go to be able to voice those, and before they escalate, be it to even more difficult circumstances. We would invest more in people development. We've done a lot of leadership development here at UK Sport. Have we focused enough on the cultural aspects of that? Probably not. And so we would add more substance to our people development work. We would look at, we have at UK Sport, we had an individual that had responsibility for performance advisors, oversight, of about, say, 5-6 sports. We'd look at how that case management operated to see whether we could gather more intelligence and spot some issues. We would create this culture health check, which has been an amazingly successful piece of work, really drawing out what staff and athletes feel, see, hear and feel about the culture in their own organisations, what could be better and where there are issues and how they might be resolved. And then really just talking more beyond the walls of UK Sport about values and behaviours and how important that is. But fundamentally, I do think this is down to good leadership in each and every sport. And I think that it's been a bit of a wake-up call for us all, leaders at every level in sport, about our respective responsibilities
within our own houses,
within our own organisations. Yeah. One thing I've always felt very strongly about, it's important not to blur the edges of responsibilities and accountabilities, and when for individuals to accept their individual, and for organisations to accept their responsibilities and their accountabilities and be clear about that. Because only by having that clarity can you then be clear about who is responsible for resolving this particular issue. In retrospect, I'm really glad those issues became very public, because if they hadn't become very public, we wouldn't have known about them, and more might have been occurring in any organisation. But we also wouldn't have actually felt compelled to take the actions we've taken since. We would have got to culture at some point in time. We might not have got to it in this cycle.
Yeah. And I always think it must be very tough for you. You're the face of the organisation, and it's criticism for that, or the sports feeling hard done by, and issues around cuts in funding. You always appear incredibly calm and reasoned in media interviews. But do those negative comments affect you personally?
When there are limited funds, then there are some winners and there's some losers. And it's really hard for those sports that actually miss out on that funding. It doesn't affect me personally insofar as I know that those decisions are right. They're strategically right for this organisation to make. So criticism doesn't affect me, but I do feel for the sports that miss out. I understand how difficult it is for a leader in those sports to have to manage this significant reduction in the income that they then have available to run their organisations and support their athletes. And I understand why that criticism, because they have a responsibility to their sport to criticise the organisation that's made a decision not to invest in them. So I don't take it personally. I understand why they speak out and speak so emotionally about the impact. I've always felt very confident that the decisions we've made at UK Sport are the right decisions to achieve the outcome that we are charged with striving to achieve.
And I've been very fortunate this summer. I was at a few events where you've received a standing ovation, which must have been a very wonderful, emotional experience. So what's been the hardest part for you leaving an organisation where you're clearly so loved and you've respected and you've had such amazing success?
I announced that I was standing down last November, and I'd been thinking about it for some time, predominantly because I really do need to spend more time with the family. This job is all absorbing, and if you're not actually working, it's going on in the head all the time. Watching sport is always with a different eye on it. It's not sport for enjoyment, it's sport for what does this mean. So I've thought for some time I need to find the right time to step down from UK sport. And there've been moments on this journey when I've thought, okay, I think it probably should be next year, and I think it should be, and then something would happen. But I always wanted to leave this organisation in a good place. It had to be the right time. I wanted to know that the people around me were settled before I stepped out. And then coincidentally, the International Netball Federation presidency role was coming up, and I was encouraged to think about applying for that. But my priority was to make sure UK sport was in a good place at the time that I did step out.
You obviously are now president at the International Netball Federation. So what does that role entail for you?
Well, the president's role of an international federation is like being the chair of any organisation. It's a real privilege to be going back into that role in the sport that actually I think made me who I am today. Is something I feel it's right to give back to that sport. Because if I hadn't had all those years of experience as being a CEO of England Netball, I would not have got this job at UK Sport, and I would not have enjoyed such an amazing period working with the colleagues that I have worked with. So it's an organisation. There are about 20 million people that are playing netball around the world. There are about 100 countries playing netball around the world, but probably only about 50-something that are full-on affiliated members. And it's a great sport, predominantly for women, and it can provide other women that, like I had, with leadership opportunities and grow their confidence to enable them to succeed in life in many other different ways. So it's a job in an organisation that is very rich in people resource, but it's poor in financial resource. That's going to be my challenge, to try to generate more income to really propel or fast track some of the work that we know that can be achieved through the sport of netball internationally.
And obviously, Olympic inclusion has long been an ambition for netball. My youngest daughter often says, why is walking an Olympic sport? And netball's not. Your family are netballers, you can tell, can't you? What do you feel it will take to make that happen?
It's certainly an ambition. Formally, it's an ambition of the organisation, of the International Netball Federation. So it has to be an ambition of me as the president. I think it's important to be pragmatic about this. There's a range of criteria that the IOC uses to make its decisions about what sports are included and what sports aren't. And a lot of that is about eyeballs on the sport, and its potential to attract spectators or engage people in the sport. So my advice to the netball family is, let's concentrate on those factors that are important to the IOC but good for netball anyway, because there's no guarantees here. There's more movement towards individual sports where many more countries than the countries that compete in netball are able to compete, and more urban sports. So it's important to keep an eye on the criteria that the IOC is using, look at those elements, think what's great for netball anyway, let's see if we can not be distracted by it, yes, but really develop the sport for the sport's sake, and we'll be in a good place. And if it happens, it happens.
And being primarily a sport for women is one of the things that obviously makes netball completely unique. And you've talked about those leadership opportunities for women too. Would opening it out to include more men in the game risk the very DNA of a sport, would you say?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think it's a risk. There are men involved in sport now. There are men playing the sport. There are men that are umpires. There are men that are, chairs, administrators. Yes. I think it's an inevitability. I don't think it's a threat. I don't think it's a risk. I think it's an opportunity. I think it's an inevitability. It's just a matter of time. Yeah.
Excellent. And whilst we have some remarkable women currently in really senior roles in sport, and the balance of boards is definitely improving, there still seems to be a long way to go in terms of women in performance roles. So why do you think we still have so few elite female coaches and performance directors?
Yes. That would be one of my disappointments. I haven't been able to crack that one. But we do know more about why. because over each autumn there's a world-class performance conference where over 400 people from the sporting industry, the performance sporting industry, get together for a conference that that UK Sport organises and delivers. And over a couple of those conferences, I actually invited the women attendees to actually gather together and just have a conversation about how they feel about the opportunities that they have, what might be the blockers to that. So there are a number of things that I heard from those women that actually can help inform an approach to potentially unlocking that. One is they wanted to see more role models of women that have succeeded in achieving significant roles in performance sport. Secondly, they wanted more networking opportunities to be coordinated to enable them to have those discussions and share their experiences with other women in similar circumstances. Thirdly, there was a view that, in fact, some of the appointment panels, selection panels, were male-dominated, and actually, So could that be addressed? And so that there's a people development team at UK Sport that is now looking at that and looking at the whole recruitment process.
That feels quite fundamental.
Fundamental, yeah, it is. And also fundamental that there are some levers that can be used by UK Sport to, for example, insist that a senior management team has got to have a female member on the senior management team in some way, shape, or form. And then the last one was about the culture of the organisations, and what I was hearing from the women is they wanted more of a developmental culture embedded into their environments, as opposed to a managing and doing culture. Because what we see in performance sport, there's a hell of a lot to do, committed people out there doing it, but they wanted more of a developmental culture to be embedded. And I think that's what the culture health checks are picking up in terms of what you're seeing, hearing, feeling, what you need, what you want more of, and what are the opportunities to grow while in role and develop to be able to progress. The lifestyle bit was more about the flexibility. So why not have job share roles, or creche provision, which many employers are thinking about. Some provide now. So we've gathered that information. We know why. Yeah. Now it's a matter of what can we at UK Sport do to support addressing some of those things, and what must the sports themselves actually really take responsibility for.
And is there an ambition, a number of targets, or a time that you're looking to
well, not
see
at this
some
point
change?
in time, but I think that's where this will head. Yeah. What's interesting is that for the first time over recent months, what the people development team has done here is mapped out a complete picture of all the people that are in these roles in the various organisations. So now, for the first time, we've been able to very easily see, the makeup of the senior management teams, in performance senior management teams in each of the sports. So you can see where, for example, where there are women and where there aren't women. But we've never actually looked at it, never had that picture before. But we have also a head of talent role in that people development team who is looking at where's the talent in the system, where are the opportunities, how do we actually move talent around the system. So there's a lot more work now strategically being managed by the people development team here to oversee the staffing structure picture.
Fascinating. That is, isn't it, the next level of making the system.
Yeah, and you need that data, you need those facts and stats before you can actually say, so what are the solutions, what are the actions we can take to actually make the positive change here. I'd be really interested to see what that looks like in 4 years' time, in 8 years' time.
Absolutely. And finally, I was going to ask you around your experience and whether being a woman in your role in the sector has had a negative impact. I mean, it doesn't feel that you have been disadvantaged by being a woman through your career.
No, I haven't been disadvantaged by being a woman, but I explained my background of working with the Women's Inter-University Athletic Board and then Netball, a women's organisation. So when I put my hat in the ring to actually join UK Sport, I personally had a doubt about whether I could work with organisations that were more male dominated. So it was, I don't think there was an obstacle actually in the recruitment, on the recruitment side, it was a personal sort of just a lingering doubt. Can I make this step into this world? Because I've been working so long in women's sport. And as soon as I'd stepped over that threshold and into the role, I thought, well, why on earth did I even think that it was a problem? Because it wasn't, and it never has been. So I've never encountered any problems at all. I felt I'm very comfortable in the roles that I've had here, and very accepted, and thankfully sort of quite respected.
And finally, just some advice for younger women entering the sector now, perhaps coming in where you were at 24, 25, those early stages. Is there any gems of advice you'd offer to those on their career pathway?
Well, one thing I would say, don't hold yourself back. Nobody is the finished article for any job they apply for, so go for it, absolutely go for it. Don't make the decision of the selection panel for them, let them make that decision. So that's the first thing, is just go for it. Believe in yourself, go for it. I think generally the biggest challenge with women is actually feeling you've got to be the finished article for a job you apply for, and you never are, you never ever are. And I've been learning on the job ever since I started my career, and it's turned out okay.
I'm incredibly grateful to Liz for meeting with me and sharing so many amazing memories from her time at UK Sport. We wish her well in her new role with the International Netball Federation, and here's hoping that the sport might one day make it into the Olympics. Please let me know what you think about the Game Changers podcast. If you could take a moment to leave a review or give us a rating on iTunes, it would be absolutely brilliant. You can find out more about all my guests at promotepr.com/gamechangers, and do subscribe too if you don't want to miss out on future episodes. Next week, I'm thrilled to say that my guest is Lauren Steadman, para-triathlon world champion and Olympic silver medalist. Lauren also enthralled us all last year as a finalist in BBC's Strictly Come Dancing.
I played on the football team at school, the hockey, the netball, did as much sport as I could, just to show all the other kids, I'm missing an arm, but I can do just as good as you can.